Hi, my name is Bella McMinn, and I'm the social media manager here at The Rock Church. I'm so glad you've connected with us today and wanted to welcome you to our online service. In addition to our weekly service, you can engage with us on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. I would love to hear from you on social media or by email. You can email me at bella@therocknv.church. Thank you again for joining us today, and I hope you enjoy the service.
Church, welcome. We are so honored that you chose to spend some of your Sunday morning with us this morning. We're going to just cruise right along with worship this morning.
Nations bow, mountains shake, all the sound of just one name. Over all, Jesus reigns. I know. Nations bow, mountains shake, at the sound of just one name. Over all, Jesus reigns. I know. There is a King of glory. There is a God who saves. One who is strong and mighty. Freedom is in his name. So open the gates of heaven. Lift up the shout of praise. There is a lion roaring. Jesus, the King of glory. There is a lion roaring. Jesus, the King of glory. I've searched the world, but it couldn't fill me. A man's empty praise and treasures of vain are never enough. Then you came along and put me back together. Now every desire is now satisfied here in your love. Oh, there's nothing better than you. There's nothing better than you, Lord. There's nothing, nothing is better than you. Yes, I know that it's true, and I'm not afraid to show you my weakness, my failures and flaws. Lord, you've seen them all, and you still call me friend. 'Cause the God of the mountain is the God of the valley, and there's not a place where your mercy and grace won't find me again. Oh, there's nothing better than you. There's nothing better than you, Lord. There's nothing, nothing is better than I see his body breaking. I see his fingers bleed. I see the darkness tremble at the ground below his feet. And in the darkest hours, there on Calvary, he was sweetly broken, broken beautifully, broken beautifully. So come on into the waters, come let the broken sing. Come all you sons and daughters, his love changes everything. So come when the fear is fighting, you're finding the risen King. Come on and let the light in, his love changes everything. Whoa, whoa. Let the broken sing. Come all you sons and daughters, your love changes everything. Come when the fear is fighting, you're finding the risen King. Come on and let the light in, your love changes everything. And I can overcome when death has lost its sting. Your love, your love, your love changes everything. And I can overcome when death has lost its sting. Your love, your love, your love changes everything. And in the darkest hours, and in the valley low, I will fear no evil, 'cause you'll never let me go. You'll never let me go. Come on into the waters, come let the broken sing. Come all you sons and daughters, his love changes everything. So come when the fear is fighting, you're finding the risen King. And come on and let the light in, your love changes everything. So come on into the waters, come let the broken sing. Come all you sons and daughters, your love changes everything. Come when the fear is fighting, you're finding the risen King. Come on and let the light in, your love changes everything. Your love, your love, 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 your love changes everything. Whoa, whoa, whoa.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much for worshiping along with us. Would you just find someone around you and just say, good rock morning?
Hey, good morning, everybody. My name's Brett, and it is an absolute pleasure to worship with you this morning. I had to miss a couple of weeks at The Rock because of travel, and I got to tell you, I missed you guys a lot. It's good to be back. There is nothing like gathering with your home church and worshiping together, is there? So if you're a first-time guest with us, welcome. We'd love to know that you've been with us. Come see us at the New Here area out in the lobby after service. If you've been here the last few Sundays, you know we've been talking about one of our core values, the core value of collectively growing. That we want to be a community of people that not only grows in numbers, but also grows spiritually. And a couple of weeks ago, Grant talked about how we can grow together by engaging in certain spiritual disciplines, like prayer and gathering together. But one really important spiritual discipline that helps us to grow spiritually is that of giving. And the leadership of The Rock, we understand that the economy has been a struggle. And as a result, some of you have struggled. It has affected everyone. It's also affected the Rock Church, by the way. We want you to know that. And I know that sometimes when our dollar doesn't go quite as far as it used to, one of the first things to go is our giving. That's kind of understandable. We sometimes maybe think that our small contribution, whatever it happens to be, won't be missed. But that does not change the fact that giving and generosity are a discipline that helps us to grow. There's a story in the book of Mark about Jesus. It says this. It says, Jesus sat down near the collection box in the temple and watched as the crowds dropped in their money. Many rich people put in large amounts. Then a poor widow came and dropped in 2 small coins. Jesus called his disciples to him and he said, I tell you the truth, this poor widow has given more than all the others who are making contributions. For they gave a tiny part of their what? Surplus. But she, poor as she is, has given everything she had to live on. So we want to encourage everyone who calls the Rock Church home to take your giving seriously. You might consider upping your giving by a small percentage. Or more importantly, maybe you've been coming for a while and you've never given. And I want to encourage you to start small. Every little contribution makes a difference, not only to your church, but also to your spiritual growth. And so we've got lots of ways that you can do that. We've got offering boxes out in the lobby. And of course, you can give online as well at our website. Last week, Mother's Day, you remember Pastor Grant and Lindsay talked about Foster the City. Foster the City, they introduced us to that. It's a way for our church to support foster families both in our church and in our community. And so this Wednesday night at 6:30, we're going to have an interest meeting. If you were stirred a little bit by that, or maybe you're just hearing about it for the first time and you might have a heart for foster families, I encourage you to come out, and there's no obligation. You're not going to sign on the dotted line or anything like that. It's just informational to find out more about Foster the City and how you might be able to engage in that ministry. And so it would be helpful to us if after service you just stop by the info center, fill out a card, let us know you're planning on coming so we can sort of prepare for childcare and set up and that sort of thing. Okay? And then finally, many of you have asked how our pastor search is going. And so we thought we would address that today, let you know that our leadership team, we're taking very seriously the task of finding a team player to help with our teaching, but also with other areas of ministry. And we as a leadership team are really excited about where the Rock Church has been going, where we're headed, and we want to invite you to pray with us to help us to find that exact right person to be a part of our team. So I encourage you to be praying for that. But you know, today we get to hear from one of our favorite guest teachers. This will be Ron's 3rd time teaching with us here at The Rock, and we're super grateful to Kindred Church for sharing him with us, aren't we? So please give a warm rock welcome to Ron Toft. Welcome, Ron.
All right. Thank you, Brett, and thank you all. It's really a pleasure for me to be back because I've really been enjoying being able to come here and speak with you a couple times now. And I was kind of reflecting on it the other day, my experience here, and I was like, you know what, I've really enjoyed this. It's been a lot of fun for me and good for me as well, and I hope it's been meaningful for you as well. So thank you for having me back, and I hope after today you will want to do so again in the future. I know that you've been, I have not enough space. I'm going to put this on the floor. I know that you've been going through, as was mentioned, your values in a series doing that, and this month you've been on your collectively growing value. And I am really glad that I get to speak on that, because that's definitely something that is close and dear to my heart and something that I have been thinking about and meditating on for a long time. And I've learned a lot about it, some which was surprising to me, because I grew up in the church, and I've really developed a lot in the way I think about this and live this out. But I was really glad to hear, as I was kind of listening to the messages this month, that there's been a real push or focus on the things, growing in the things that are not necessarily here on Sunday morning, especially your small groups. And I love that, because when a church talks about growth, it can be tempting to talk about it in terms of numbers, people in the seats, that's where growth is. And that's not necessarily wrong, but I love that The Rock has that focus on doing things in your small groups and in other ventures that you're doing out in the community, because I really strongly believe that that's incredibly important. And so to kind of give my own push in that direction, today I'm going to try to convince you that church is actually not a good place to grow. And when I say church today, by the way, I mean the event, the church-sanctioned events, Sunday service as the pinnacle of that. So bear with me as I try to convince you of something that you're all here to do. And to start, I want to talk about magic. Not that kind of magic. I thought about doing a card trick, but then I remembered I don't know any. The kind of magic that I'm talking about actually comes from one of my favorite Christian thinkers and authors right now. His name is Andy Crouch. Highly recommend any of his reading or any of his teachings, podcasts, etc. And he talks about magic in the sense of kind of like in the ancient world sense of the term. And of course, he's a biblical thinker, and so he puts it into a biblical perspective. But magic, in the way that he's talking about it, essentially means the promise of a big payout with very little work, without having to do the work to earn it. And he says, that magic, that what he calls the dream of magic, getting that big payout without having to put in the work, is very tempting. And especially in the ancient world where they were trying to survive, it was even more tempting to think, if we could just do some small thing and get a big payout for it, well, that's worth pursuing. And he puts it in biblical terms kind of in the sense or the realm of idolatry or false gods that the nations around Israel were all pursuing. And indeed that Israel throughout their history often pursued. And these false gods, these idols, would promise great things for a small price. If only you made an idol and put it in a place of honor. If only you prayed or dedicated to me in some way. If only you sacrificed an animal or some grain and oil and such, then I'll give you a great harvest, fertility, protection on the battlefield. Whatever the promise was that the God made, and the price was small, and that's very tempting. And people went after those promises. And Mr. Crouch says, it's tempting also because it works. Initially, they don't do these things because they don't work. The ancient people went after idols and these gods because they delivered on their promises. But the danger of magic is that only happens at first. And like an addiction, the purveyor of magic eventually delivers less and less and demands more and more, until you are tricked and trapped into paying what Andy says is the ultimate cost of magic every time. The ultimate price of the life of your children. And indeed, we see that in the Bible a number of times in the Old Testament, in which nations and peoples have been trapped and were sacrificing their children to their gods. And it is the few times in those cases when God tells his people, you need to wipe them off the map because that is so evil to me that it has to be eradicated. And do not take anything. Don't even take their cattle. Certainly don't take their idols or seek after these gods or marry into their families. The Israelites didn't always listen to that, and it brought calamity. But Andy sees this kind of pattern of this is what magic does to a people when you pursue those easy goals. It's a trap. And it's easy, to kind of say like, oh, those silly ancient people, worshiping their idols, what fools. But Andy is actually, his specialty is looking at the intersection of spirituality and technology. And he says that we continue to pursue that dream of magic because it is still tempting today. And in fact, that we have kind of perfected it in our technology. Because what Andy says magic really is a shortcut to transformation. You don't have to put in the work to get the result. You get to kind of shortcut that transformation, that work and dedication of transforming yourself to earn that result, which is what our God calls us to. So Andy makes an example with technology that, if I wanted to, listen to and enjoy the benefits of excellent music, before I had to put in the long hours of practice and years of dedication to transform myself into a great musician to get those benefits. Now with technology, literally the only work I have to do is push a button and I can instantly enjoy the greatest music and all its benefits that humanity has ever made. Or country music if I want. And so he says the dream of magic is actually alive and well. We are still looking for shortcuts to great things without putting in the work and dedication to get them. And indeed, then of course, he also says that we do this in church. And I'm kind of jumping off from him at this point here, because our modern version of church that we've created still promises this dream of magic, I think. In that we say you will get all of the great spiritual benefits of knowing God and seeking after him with the low bar of coming to church and sitting in a comfortable chair and watching it happen on a stage. And as long as you do that consistently and agree with it, congratulations, you've arrived. And nobody, of course, says that consciously, but there's kind of an unwritten expectation or rule or contract, you could say, that as long as you're coming consistently and fulfilling your obligation in the show, then we're not going to bother you much about your life outside these walls, right? There's a little bit of that kind of in the background. And it's not surprising. We want the dream of magic. We want the great spiritual transformation without having to challenge our lifestyle. Jesus had, in one of my favorite stories in the New Testament, Jesus had a great example of this where the crowds are pressing in on him as he's in some town, and they're saying, Jesus, show us a sign, give us some miracle. They're there for the show, the entertainment. And Jesus, seemingly fed up with it, you can kind of almost hear the exasperation in his voice, turns to the crowd and says, you know what, if you want to follow me, you have to drink my blood and eat my flesh. And people were like, whoa, all right, there it is. I've been saying there's a catch with this guy. They're like, what? That's a weird thing to say. I think I'm done. I think that was the end for me. I'm just here for the show. I don't want a challenge to my lifestyle. I just want to be entertained. And the crowd disperses and leaves. And Jesus turns to his disciples, of course, and says, how about you? Do you want to go? And they say, yeah, you kind of think, yeah, they do want that, because that was a weird thing to hear from Jesus. But they don't have a choice. They say, we've given everything. Where else can we go? We're with you. And I think that church is a little bit more of that. It's both. It's both the mentality of the disciples and it's the mentality of the crowd in that story. Fortunately for us, this is nothing new, this pursuit of the dream of magic, this hope and trust in that. And so in order to kind of convince you of what I'm hoping to convince you of, that church is not the best place for growth, I want to go through a history of the ancestry of the church in the Bible. And we're going to kind of look at some stories and go through the kind of evolution, if I can say that, of the church that brought us to where we are today. And, 4,000 years of church history in 20 minutes. Bear with me. I'm going to do my best. We're just going to look at some very quick stories that will showcase a pattern throughout the Israelites' history, in which I think that will kind of show what we're looking at here. But let's start with the first church. And again, remember what I'm saying by church. And it was the tabernacle. It was the proto-church. The tabernacle is so beautiful. The more I've learned about it, which has been recently, I've really been shocked at what an incredible thing this was, the tabernacle. And really, it's a beautiful meditation on not just the truth of who God is, but the fact that most importantly and poignantly, he wants to be with us. He wants to dwell among us. And reading about the tabernacle and the design and construction of it is so boring. It's like some of the driest parts of Scripture, but God gives 6 chapters worth of painstakingly detailed plans for this tabernacle and how to build it to Moses while Moses is on the top of Mount Sinai. And And then they build it according to those rules, so they just repeat the exact same thing, the same 6 chapters. And at first it seems like, why am I reading this? But it's actually quite beautiful because God is saying, I want to dwell among you. The tabernacle, the Hebrew word that we translate to tabernacle means to dwell, a dwelling place, to be among. God lived in a tent. Ultimately, the tabernacle was a tent. It was beautifully adorned, for sure, and it was probably pretty pricey to make. But it was just a tent among these people's tents. God was letting them know, I am with you, and you are accessible. I'm accessible to you. Come and know me, and I will go where you will go. It was designed to be mobile, and I will lead you, and you will follow me. And it was an important lesson for God to his people as they were nomads in the desert coming out of Egypt, that God was dwelling among them and was easily accessible to them. God was quite literally their neighbor. And of course, the tabernacle also famously housed the Ark of the Covenant, right? This was the seal of the covenant he made with his people, as well as, again, kind of a symbol of his presence among them, because it kind of resembled like his throne on earth. It was called the mercy seat. And that was housed within the tabernacle and went with them wherever they went. Again, it was mobile. However, in an interesting scene that we're going to look at here, we see a dangerous pattern emerge on how they use and trust in the Ark of the Covenant. Let me set the scene before we go to the scripture. The Israelites have come fairly recently to the Promised Land. They've settled, and they're in battle with their age-old enemy, the Philistines. And they've made their camps in nearby cities, and they meet on the field of battle, and the Philistines win. And they kill 4,000 Israelite soldiers. The Israelites, they retreat and they go back to their camp, and that's where we have here 1 Samuel 4:3. And when the troops came to the camp, the elders of Israel said, "Why has the Lord defeated us today before the Philistines? Let us bring the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord here from Shiloh, that it may come among us and save us from the power of our enemies." So the people went to Shiloh. By the way, keep that place name in mind. Shiloh is where the tabernacle and the ark had kind of settled in the Promised Land, and we're going to see it again. The people sent to Shiloh and brought from there the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord of hosts, who is enthroned on the cherubim. And this is interesting because, they're bringing it into battle as kind of a silver bullet to save them. And surely there has been some, use of the Ark of the Covenant in battle before, and Jericho is kind of the big one. But in those cases, God told them, go and take the ark before you and lead with that, and I will give you victory. Here we see something different where they decide to go and get it and bring it as something like a charm, a trick. They're hoping that the Ark of the Covenant, because it's this powerful relic that they have at their command, will be a magic spell to give them a magical victory in battle. But they've forgotten that it was just a symbol. There's no power in the ark. It's just a golden box with some angels on it and some cool stuff inside. The power they'd forgotten, it seems, comes not from having this relic that will assure them victory in some magical way. The power comes from remembering that God is with them. But they were using it as a tool. They were trusting in the power of the ark itself. And when it comes into the camp of the Israelites, they're so excited that, yes, we have this salvation, that they give up a cry that is so powerful, it shakes the earth, and the Philistines hear it from their camp, and they say, what's going on? A god has come into the camp of the Israelites, and we're going to be defeated, and we must fight even harder, or else we're going to be their slaves. And they meet on the field of battle, the Israelites convinced of victory because they have the ark with them, and the Philistines devastate them. The defeat is so intense that the Israelite army disbands and they don't go back to camp. They flee back to their homes. The Philistines killed 30,000 Israelites at that battle. And of course, captured the Ark of the Covenant. And as we'll see a clue later in another verse, probably ransacked and destroyed the town of Shiloh. And so we see something of a destruction of the tabernacle when the ark is captured. Eventually, it comes back. King David brings it to Jerusalem. He has, been conquering. David has. He's been expanding Israelites' borders, and he gets the Ark of the Covenant back to Jerusalem, and he says, "It's time for us to build a proper temple to God, to house this ark." And God says, "All right, fine. I'll allow there to be a temple to me in Jerusalem, but you are a man of war. You're not going to build it. Your son Solomon is going to build it when he's king because he's a man of peace." So David makes the preparations. Solomon gets it built, and it is this wonderful, glorious, amazing building. It's still considered one of the wonders of the ancient world. It was awesome. And I think that there's something I'd never really noticed before kind of a change, almost like a switch here that I had never given enough weight to. Because the tabernacle and its simplicity and mobility and its promise of God dwelling amongst his people, that was God's idea and God's design. The temple, which is a permanent place and built to be awe-inspiring and glorifying and to show the power not just of God, but also the nation of Israel, that was man's idea and man's design. Before, God was very specifically amongst his people and going around in his people in a tent. And he seemed to have meant it to last forever, and it lasted about 500 years. The temple is a fixed and permanent building, whereas before God went to his people, now people have to come to God, to the temple, to know God and to seek after him. And I think there's an important switch there that we don't often give enough weight to, but it's interesting nonetheless. So the temple is built. Solomon puts on this huge dedication ceremony. It lasts for days and days. He does all his prayers and dedication, and it's quite wonderful. And then at the night after the dedication, God comes to Samuel. And I'm going to flip to my Bible as we go, to Solomon rather. And we're going to see what God has to say about his new temple to King Solomon. We'll start in 2 Chronicles 7, verse 14. God says, "If my people who are called by my name humble themselves," keep that word in mind, humble, "and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear them from heaven, and I'll forgive their sin and heal their land." All right, sounds pretty good. ... We're going to run down to verse 19 because there's a big but here. "But if you turn aside and forsake my statutes and my commandments that I have set before you, and you go and serve other gods and worship them, then I will pluck you up from my land that I have given you. And this house, the temple, that I have consecrated for my name, I will cast out of my sight. I will make it a proverb and a byword among all people. When anyone comes by and sees it, they will say, 'What has the Lord done to this land and to this house?' And they will say, 'Because they abandoned the Lord, the God of their fathers, who brought them out of the land of Egypt and laid hold on other gods and worshiped them and served them. Therefore, he has brought all this disaster to them.'" God is very clear. Yes, you've built this wonderful temple for me, kind of for yourselves, and I will consecrate it, and indeed his glory does come down into the temple. But he says, do not be fooled by this place. If you continue to seek after me, that's what I want. I will hear you, I'll forgive you, I'll bless your land. But if you turn from me and trust in this place instead of me, I'll destroy it. And I will exile you from this land that I've given you. I can't help but hear a dad saying, "Fine, I'll take my kids to Disneyland. But if you keep screaming, I'll turn this car around," right? It's a little bit of that in here. And I think God says this powerfully and plainly because he knows exactly where his people's hearts are. And indeed, over many generations of Israel and many reigns of kings, we see this very thing happen. The people turn more and more away from God and his commandments and more towards other idols and false gods and the dream of magic that they're seeing in the nations around them. God calls us to hard work of transformation. The other people, they just had to do some small payment and they got great things. It's quite tempting, and the Israelites took it up. And they did more and more evil and terrible things, not just in the land that God gave them, but indeed in the temple itself. And we see this, and God continues, giving this exact same warning over and over and over, and he's trying to let them know, like, I'm going to destroy this place if you keep doing this. I'm going to take you away from this land. You're going to be a curse among nations. And he tries to continually, persistently warn them, and perhaps no more so than in Jeremiah, he finally kind of gives the final warning, or the most poignant one at least. He tells the prophet Jeremiah actually to go stand in the gates of the temple and deliver this prophecy. We'll be in Jeremiah 7, starting at verse 3. "Thus says the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, amend your ways and your deeds, and I will let you dwell in this place. Do not trust in these deceptive words. 'This is the temple of the Lord, the temple of the Lord, the temple of the Lord.' For if you truly amend your ways and your deeds, if you truly execute justice," keep that word in mind too, "one with another, if you do not oppress the sojourner, the fatherless, or the widow, or shed innocent blood in this place, and if you do not go after other gods to your own harm," God knows where the promise of magic goes to, "then I will let you dwell in this place, in the land that I gave of old to your fathers forever. Behold, you trust in deceptive words. 'This is the temple of the Lord, the temple of the Lord,' to no avail. Will you steal, murder, commit adultery, swear falsely, make offerings to Baal, and go after other gods that you have not known, and then come and stand before me in this house, which is called by my name, and say, 'We are delivered,' only to go on doing all these abominations? Has this house, which is called by my name, become a den of robbers in your eyes?" We're going to hear that again, aren't we? "Behold, I myself have seen it, declares the Lord. Go now to my place that was in Shiloh, where I made my name dwell at first, and see what I did to it because of the evil of my people Israel. And now, because you have done all these things, declares the Lord, and when I spoke to you persistently, you did not listen. When I called you, you did not answer. They were not humbly seeking after the Lord. Therefore, I will do to this house, the temple that is called by my name, in which you trust, and to the place that I gave to you and your fathers, as I did to Shiloh. And I will cast you out of my sight. And indeed, that's exactly what happens. A few decades later, or sometime later, I should say, the Babylonians besiege Israel and Judah. They destroy, or they capture the Israelites and drive them out of the land, and they destroy the great temple of Solomon in Jerusalem, and it is no more. Because the Israelites once again made a mistake of trusting in the temple, thinking that it was a magic spell of protection, that they could go and do these other things that God had specifically told them not to do because it was harmful for them. And they were not seeking God in the way that he had told them to do in his house. They trusted in the glory of the house so that they could go and live ungodly lives, saying, surely God will not punish us or let us be destroyed by our enemies because we have his temple. He can't let his temple be destroyed. They'd forgotten that God said that's exactly what he would do, because he's greater than the temple. He is what makes the temple great, in fact, as Jesus will say in a bit. And so the Israelites are in exile, and the temple lay in ruins. For 70 years, the Israelites are in exile. The Persians allow some of them to come back, and they begin to rebuild the wall, and they build a new temple. And this is the next kind of chapter of our ancestry of church. The temple that the exiles built. And it's not as great because they don't have the resources or the people that Solomon did. And at this time, God is speaking to them through some of the minor prophets, and specifically the prophet Haggai says something really interesting. And he says, is there anyone, Israel, among you who is old enough to remember the old temple and how great it was? Now look at this one. Is it as nothing in your eyes? It's not as good as the last temple. It's not as glorious. It's not as powerful. It's not as easy to trust in this. But take heart and fear not, for my spirit remains in your midst. God is still in the tabernacle among his people, he says. So fear not. The exiles build that temple. God is still assuring them he is in their midst. And that's the temple that stands for another 500 some years until the time of Jesus in Jerusalem. And Roman governor Herod, he does a huge public works project around the time of Jesus' life, and he kind of once again builds up the temple that the exiles had built into this great monument to the glory of God and the power of Israel, and also Rome. And he builds the Temple Mount, and it's this, once again, this glorious place that's incredible to look at and easy to trust in. And that's where Jesus comes onto the scene. And I could go on for this for a long time, but we're running a little short, so let me just say, Jesus sets a new pattern. He does powerful, wonderful things. He teaches great sermons in the synagogues. But amazingly, the disciples don't really record or pass on those teachings, which, if you understand the rabbinic tradition of the time, was almost unbelievable, because that was the disciples' whole point the disciples of a rabbi, was to pass on his teachings. What they learned was important to pass on was what Jesus did when he left the synagogue. We know very little of what he did in the synagogue. We know a lot of what he did when he left the church to do ministry out amongst his people. And indeed, we see Jesus traveling all around. He rarely stays in one place for very long, not too dissimilar to a tabernacle. But eventually, Jesus does come to the temple with his followers as an adult. He goes there as a child, but he comes as an adult during his ministry with his disciples, and he interacts with the temple for a good amount of time. And it's interesting to kind of read those chapters paying attention to the way that Jesus interacts with the temple. I've never really done that before, but it's a little surprising, well, maybe not surprising, that Jesus, he seems to be respectful of the temple as God's house, but really he's almost indifferent to it. And I think that's a little bit more of what God desires for us in our relationship to the temple. Respectful, sure, it's important. He went there and he did his things, but kind of indifferent. And there's a couple stories I want to highlight, and the first one's going to be in Matthew 21, and this is Jesus' first coming into the temple. I don't think I realized this either until I was preparing for this message. The chapter starts with a triumphal entry. He comes into Jerusalem on the donkey. And Jesus entered the temple for the first time, seemingly, and drove out all those who sold and bought in the temple, and he overturned the tables of the money changers and the seats of those who sold pigeons. We all know the story that Jesus, in Matthew 21, the first thing he does, apparently, comes into the temple courts and starts getting mad and throwing tables and saying, "Get out of here with this." And he says, "It is written, my house is to be a house of prayer, but you have made it a den of robbers." I always read this scene as an act of anger to justify justice, God's justice in his temple. And that's certainly probably some true, but when I connect to this New Testament story to its Old Testament roots and reference, which we should always do, I actually see more mercy in what Jesus is doing here. That he's saying, you are following down a path towards destruction that your forefathers fell into multiple times. How many times does the temple have to be destroyed before you stop using it as some magical way to live an ungodly life? These money changers and so forth, they were taking advantage of people. It was an act of oppression, largely. And he's like, you're going down the bad path again. That's why he references the den of robbers. I think it's more an act of mercy than anything for a people that he loves and cares about and wants to see thrive. Other stories that kind of show this, Jesus, a little bit later, is in the temple courts again, giving the woe to the Pharisees, which the Pharisees are all over this place. Surely they're listening. It's pretty bold. But at one point he says, "Woe to you, blind guides, for you put trust in the gold of the temple. You don't even put trust in the temple itself, but you say if anyone swears on the gold of the temple, then he's held to his word." We're going to be on the Micah one in a little bit, sorry. He says, you don't even trust in the gift of the altar, but if you swear on the altar itself, then you're bound. He's like, you're going even further than your forefathers did, who trusted in the temple to their own demise. Now you're just blatantly trusting in the gold of the temple to save you. Another story that perhaps brings us all together is that Jesus is in there with his followers in the temple courts, and remember, his disciples are kind of like young country kids, and they're like, "Wow, Jesus, have you seen this place? Look at these buildings, they're huge. Look at the beautiful adornments." And Jesus essentially says, don't be too impressed. Don't put your trust in this building, because pretty soon it's going to be destroyed. Not one stone will stand on another. And indeed, in a handful of decades later, that's exactly what happens. The Roman army besieges Jerusalem and once again destroys the temple of God, because his people put their trust in the temple and they did not seek after God instead. And the temple was once again destroyed, yet to be rebuilt. And that brings us to today, this morning, in this building, still after thousands of years, holding two truths in our hand. One, a sincere desire to humbly seek after the Lord, and two, an enduring temptation to the dream of magic in this place. And so we build this building and we adorn its walls and we fill it with lights and cameras and wonderful music and excellent teaching, and occasionally a guy that comes and tells you it's all useless. And we fill the kids area with toys and cool rock climbing walls and cartoon characters. And please hear me, all those things are good and we should continue to do them. But when we talk about growth, do not trust in these good things to be a shortcut to your growth in becoming more like Christ. Do not go and live a life outside of here that is full of what God called the abominations in that Jeremiah passage, and then come here on Sunday morning and say, "We are delivered." Because that is a path to destruction. God has warned his people again and again. Do not come in here trusting that by fulfilling your social contract, by sitting in those seats and agreeing with what's happening on stage, that will be a shortcut to your transformation. So again, when it comes to growth, do not trust in the things in this room, because there is no magic here. This place is a place that God reminds us that he dwells among us in every moment of our life. He does not live here. He exists with us out in the world. Now, fortunately, there is not just doom and gloom when Jesus talks about the temple. It's not all, dire warnings. There's actually also good things and promises of blessing. And none perhaps so more powerful than what the prophet Micah said in response to an indictment from God. And that's what I want to read as we finish up here. starting in verse 6. With what shall I come before the Lord and bow myself before God on high? Shall I come before him with burnt offerings, with calves a year old? He's talking about the temple. He's talking about church service. Will the Lord be pleased with thousands of rams, with 10,000 rivers of oil? Shall I give my firstborn for my transgressions? He's talking about the dream of magic. The fruit of my body for the sin of my soul. And I think God hates this because it is a double insult to him, because he already paid his firstborn for the transgressions of our souls. How dare we put ourselves in a position in which we will do that again? Verse 8 is where it gets good. He says, he has told you, O man, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you but to do justice and to love kindness and to walk humbly with your God? So if you want to collectively grow, Rock Church, then go out from this place and live lives defined and known by doing justice and loving kindness and walking humbly with your Lord. As families, as friend groups, as small groups, and other things that the church does outside of the Sunday morning service. And then, I say, come into this place and celebrate what the Lord has done outside of these walls. Lament the hardships and failures of it together. Be encouraged by excellent worship and good teaching by people who have done the work to transform themselves into these things. And be encouraged to go out and do it more. Find what the next step is for you in your growth that God is calling you to and pursue it. And don't be tempted by the dream of magic that coming in here will fulfill that somehow. This is good. This place is good, and it should be a part of your journey of growth. It will be a part of your transformation. But it's never going to fulfill it. God calls us to great things, and it takes hard work, and it takes dedication, and we will become more godly and have a great impact on our community around us, but not by coming to church. And even if you come every week and you're a super, churchy person that does volunteers and all the things, that's good. It's not going to be the transformation and the growth that God calls us to, though. It will be but a small part of it. And, I know that The Rock already does this. That's why I feel comfortable coming to you with this message as a guest speaker. The Rock is doing great things outside of a Sunday service, which also is excellent. You have your thrift store and your partnership with, what's it called? Yeah, thank you. What is it?
Project 150.
Say it again.
Project 150.
Say it again.
Project 150.
Project 150. And so many other things that I'm probably not even aware of. Your small groups. That's where the growth happens as a church, is outside doing those things. So get involved with ones that you care about. And if there's something that is a passion of your heart that God is calling to you that the church is not already doing, go and do it. Make it happen. And if you're not sure what your next step is, there's your next step. Pray and meditate about, God, what are you calling me to that I have not been willing to put the work in yet, that I've been hoping that just coming to church will cover? If you're not sure where to start, come talk to me. I'll give you some great resources to get going. Or your pastors here, your small group leaders, they all put in the work to make these things happen, and you can join with them in doing that. But I encourage you, whether you're a veteran member of The Rock, whether you're an occasional visitor, or even a new visitor, be on guard against the temptation of magic in this place. And instead, pursue the transformation that God not only calls us to, but empowers us to do. And please know, I'm not talking about everyone here has to become a pastor or a leader or something like that. It's going to look different for everyone. God has called you, given you a particular passion and a purpose. And whether it's even in the setting of church, maybe it's in your work or in your family, in your home. But continue to grow and to take the next step in your transformation to godliness, and then come here and celebrate that. Band, you can go ahead and come on up. Let me finish with a benediction. May the Lord bless us and keep us and make his face to shine upon us and give us peace today and always. Amen.
Christ is my firm foundation, the rock on which I stand when everything around me is shaking. I've never been more glad that I put my faith in Jesus, 'cause He's never let me down. He's faithful through generations. So why would He fail now? He won't. He won't. I've still got joy in chaos. I've got peace that makes no sense. So I won't be going under. I'm not held by my own strength, 'cause I built my life on Jesus. He's never let me down. He's faithful in every season. So why would He fail now? He won't. He won't. He won't fail. He won't fail. He won't. No, no, no. No, no, no. He won't. He won't fail. He won't fail. Christ is my firm foundation, the rock on which I stand when everything around me is shaking. I've never been more glad that I put my faith in Jesus, 'cause He's never let me down. He's faithful through generations. So why would He fail now? He won't. He won't. He won't fail. He won't fail. Ooh. Rain came, wind blew, but my house was built on you. I'm safe with you. I'm gonna make it through. Come on, let's sing it together now. Rain came, wind blew, but my house was built on you. Oh, I'm safe with you. I'm gonna make it through. Come on, sing it like you believe it. Rain came, wind blew, but my house was built on. My house was built on you. I'm
Another great day at the Rock. Hey, just a quick reminder that next Sunday we have our Rock Brunch. And so we're going to gather together for a little bit shorter worship service, and then we're going to head out and have a barbecue put on by our barbecue team, cafe team. They're awesome. It would be helpful if you'd let us know that you're planning on coming. Either get online and you can let us know there, or you can stop at the info center just so that we can be sure to have enough food. Also, if you would like to bring a barbecue side or a dessert, you're welcome to. No obligation, though. So that would be awesome as well. And thank you, Ron, for that heart check today. Good reminder that we can now leave this building and we can do justly and we can love kindness and we can walk humbly with our God, right? So have a great week. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.